The mashed potatoes looked like concrete mix, and frankly, they probably tasted better than anything else on Lydia Hale's Thanksgiving table. I sat there, fork in hand, watching my wife Marilyn laugh at her mother's latest joke about my blue-collar limitations, and I realized something profound. After 19 years of marriage, I'd finally figured out what structural failure looked like from the inside. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Elias, dear, Lydia said, her voice dripping with the kind of condescension that could strip paint. Have you given any more thought to finding a real career? Marilyn deserves better than a man who plays with dirt and concrete all day. I looked up from my plate, where the turkey sat like an extra weight. Around the table, Marilyn's extended family watched me with the kind of anticipation usually reserved for car accidents. My wife sat beside me, her guidance counselor's smile plastered on her face, saying nothing, not a damn thing. Well, Lydia, I said, setting down my fork with deliberate care, someone has to build the foundations that hold up all those fancy offices where real careers happen. Funny how nobody thinks about that until the building starts to lean. The silence stretched like a rubber band about to snap. Marilyn's cousin Janet shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Uncle Robert cleared his throat and reached for the wine bottle. But Lydia? Lydia just smiled, that razor-sharp smile that had been cutting me down for 2 decades. Foundation work, she repeated, like she was discussing sewage treatment. How quaint. Though I suppose someone has to do the manual labor while the educated people handle the important decisions. That's when I felt it. That moment when an engineer realizes the load-bearing wall he's been looking at isn't load-bearing at all. It's just decoration, and the whole structure is about to come down. You're absolutely right, I said, standing up slowly. Every eye in the room locked onto me. Someone does have to make the important decisions. I picked up my wine glass, still half full of Lydia's expensive Cabernet, and raised it in a toast. Here's to important decisions and to finally understanding what really matters. I drained the glass in one long swallow, set it down on the white tablecloth with a soft clink, and walked toward the front door. Behind me, I heard Marilyn's sharp intake of breath. Elias, where are you going? You can't just leave. I turned around at the doorway, looking back at the table full of people who'd spent years making me feel like I wasn't quite good enough to breathe their air. Marilyn's face was flushed with embarrassment, her mother's expression pure triumph. Watch me, I said. The November air hit my face like a slap of reality as I walked to my truck. My phone buzzed before I'd even started the engine. Marilyn. This is ridiculous. Come back inside and apologize. I stared at the text for a long moment, then typed back, No. The drive home took 20 minutes, and with each mile, something inside me shifted, like tumblers falling into place in a lock I'd been trying to open for years. By the time I pulled into our driveway, my driveway since I'd been paying the mortgage for 19 years, I knew exactly what I was going to do. Inside our house, everything looked different. The furniture Marilyn had picked out, the decorations that screamed guidance counselor chic, the family photos where her smile always seemed just a little brighter than mine. It all looked like someone else's life. I went to my home office and pulled out the laptop I used for work. Then I walked to Marilyn's desk in the corner of our bedroom and opened her laptop. She'd never been good with passwords, still used her maiden name and birth year for everything. Her email opened like a door I'd been afraid to walk through. The first few messages were normal. School stuff, appointment confirmations, spam about Black Friday sales. Then I saw a name that made my stomach drop. Darren Royce. The gym teacher at Marilyn's school, the guy she'd mentioned a few times. Always with that little laugh that should have been a warning sign. I clicked on the message thread. Can't wait for our weekend getaway. Tell Elias you're at that education conference again. He never checks anyway. D. He's so clueless. Sometimes I think he'd rather look at blueprints than me. You make me feel like a woman again. M. Your husband sounds like a real winner. What kind of man chooses concrete over you? D. The kind who thinks providing money is the same as providing love. God, I can't wait to feel your hands on me again. M. I scrolled down. The messages went back 8 months. 8 months of my wife telling another man how boring I was, how predictable, how she deserved better. 8 months of planning secret meetings while I worked 60-hour weeks to pay for the life she complained wasn't good enough. There were photos, nothing pornographic, but intimate enough. Marilyn in a hotel bathrobe smiling at the camera. Darren shirtless at some beach with a message. Thinking of you at the conference, beautiful. My hands were steady as I took screenshots of everything. 19 years of marriage, And this is what it came down to. A cheating wife, a condescending mother-in-law, and a gym teacher who thought he was upgrading my life. My phone rang. Marilyn. Elias, what the hell is wrong with you? You embarrassed me in front of my entire family. Did I? I said, still scrolling through her messages. That's interesting, because I thought I just left a dinner where your mother spent 2 hours explaining why I'm not good enough for you. She meant every word, Marilyn. And so did you. You just sat there and let her tear me apart. You're being dramatic. Come home. We'll talk about this like adults. I looked around our bedroom at the bed where my wife had been planning her escape for 8 months while I slept beside her, oblivious. I am home, I said, and we are going to talk, but not the way you think. I hung up and went back to her laptop. There was more. So much more. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. Not because I was actually sick, but because I had some structural engineering to do on my own life, and that required a clear schedule and a calm mind. Marilyn had come home around 11 the night before, her key turning in the lock like she was trying not to wake someone. I'd been sitting in my office, still reading her emails, still taking screenshots, still discovering just how thoroughly my wife had been planning her exit strategy. She'd found me there, laptop open, her messages displayed on my screen like evidence in a courtroom. Elias, I can explain. Can you? I'd said, not looking up from the screen. Because I've been reading for 3 hours, and I'm pretty sure I understand the situation perfectly. The fight that followed was the kind that leaves scorch marks. She'd tried denial first, then anger, then the classic, it didn't mean anything, defense. I'd listened to it all with the detached interest of an engineer examining a failed foundation. When she finally ran out of words, I'd simply closed the laptop and gone to sleep in the guest room. Now it was Friday morning, and Marilyn had left for work without saying a word, which was perfect because I had calls to make. First call, Anna, my older sister, who happened to be a divorce attorney in Boston. Elias, it's 7 a.m. Are you okay? I need legal advice, I said. Hypothetically, if someone wanted to protect their assets before filing for divorce, what would be the smartest way to do that? There was a pause. This isn't hypothetical, is it? No. Jesus, Elias, what happened? I gave her the short version. Anna listened without interrupting, which was one of the things that made her a good lawyer. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. How long has this been going on? 8 months that I can prove, maybe longer. Do you have documentation? Screenshots of everything, emails, text messages, photos, enough to wallpaper the house. Good. Don't delete anything, don't confront her again until we have a strategy. And Elias? I'm sorry. I always liked Marilyn. So did I said. Turns out we were both wrong. Second call, my bank. I'd been thinking about this all night, running through the logistics like I was planning a construction project. Our checking account was joint, but I'd been the only one making deposits for years. Our savings account was in both names, but I had documentation showing every dollar had come from my paychecks. The mortgage was in both names, but I'd been making the payments. I'd like to open a new checking account, I told the bank representative. Individual, not joint. Certainly, Mr. Porter. Will you be closing your existing joint account? Not yet, but I'd like to redirect my direct deposit to the new account, effective immediately. It took 30 minutes to set up. 30 minutes to redirect 19 years of financial partnership into a stream that flowed only toward me. When I hung up, I felt like I'd just diverted a river. Third call. Rick Donnelly, my best friend since high school and the owner of the Level Beam, the bar where half the town did their serious drinking and all their serious talking. Porter, what's happening, brother? I need to ask you something, and I need you to be straight with me. Shoot. Have you heard any talk around town about Marilyn and Darren Royce? The silence stretched long enough for me to know the answer before he said it. Shit, Elias. How long have you known? Since last night. How long has everyone else known? Couple months, maybe. You know how it is? People talk, but nobody wants to be the one to tell the husband. I closed my eyes. What exactly are people saying? That they've been seen together at that motel out on Route 9, that she's been lying about those education conferences, that Royce has been bragging at Murphy's pub about his older woman. My grip tightened on the phone. He's been bragging. Look, man, I should have told you, but I don't know what I figured. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry, Rick. Just do me a favor. Tonight, if anyone asks where I am or what I'm doing, you haven't seen me. Elias, what are you planning? I'm planning to have a conversation with Mr. Royce, a professional consultation about structural integrity. I hung up before Rick could talk me out of it. The rest of the day I spent researching, not Marilyn's emails. I'd seen enough of those to last a lifetime. Instead, I researched Darren Royce, social media, public records, anything I could find about the man who'd been sleeping with my wife and apparently bragging about it to anyone who'd listen. Turned out Darren was 38, divorced, lived in a rented apartment across town, and had a habit of posting shirtless gym selfies with captions about living life to the fullest. His Facebook was full of motivational quotes and photos of him at various bars around town, usually with his arm around women who looked young enough to be his students. At 4:30, my phone buzzed with a text from Marilyn. "Working late tonight. Don't wait up." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back, "Have fun." She didn't respond. At 5:15, I drove to the high school. Marilyn's car was gone from the parking lot, but Darren's red Camaro was still there. I parked across the street and waited. 20 minutes later, he came out of the building, gym bag slung over his shoulder, looking exactly like what he was, a middle-aged man trying too hard to look young. He got in his car and pulled out of the parking lot, heading east toward Route 9, toward the motel where my wife was probably waiting for him. I followed at a distance, my truck blending into the evening traffic. The Sleepy Inn Motel sat on a stretch of road between our town and the next, the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask questions. Darren's Camaro was parked in front of room 12. I pulled into the parking lot of the diner across the street and waited. 30 minutes later, Marilyn's Honda pulled up next to the Camaro. I watched my wife of 19 years get out of her car, look around quickly, and knock on the door of room 12. Darren answered immediately, pulling her inside with an embrace that made my stomach turn. I sat there for 2 hours, watching the light in the window, thinking about the life I'd built with a woman who'd been systematically tearing it down behind my back. When the light finally went out, I started my truck and drove home. But I didn't go inside. Instead, I drove to the construction site where my crew was working on a new office building. I had keys to the site trailer and the equipment shed. More importantly, I had access to tools and a quiet place to think. I was still there when my phone rang at 11:30. "Elias, where are you? Your truck isn't in the driveway." "I'm working," I said. "This late?" "Some projects require night work, Marilyn. You should understand that better than anyone." Another pause. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I hope your conference was educational." I hung up and turned off my phone. Then I started planning. Saturday morning arrived gray and cold, the kind of November day that makes you remember winter is coming whether you're ready or not. I'd spent the night in the site trailer, not because I couldn't go home, but because I needed space to think without looking at the bed where my wife had been lying to me for 8 months. When I finally drove home around 7 a.m., Marilyn's car was in the driveway, but the house felt empty in a way that had nothing to do with noise levels. I found her in the kitchen, still in her bathrobe, nursing a cup of coffee and staring at her phone. "We need to talk," she said without looking up. "Do we?" I poured myself coffee from the pot she'd made. Even her coffee felt different now, like everything familiar had been shifted slightly to the left. "Elias, I know you're upset about yesterday, but storming out of my mother's house and then disappearing all night isn't going to solve anything." I sat down across from her at the kitchen table where we'd eaten breakfast together for 19 years. "You're right. Storming out didn't solve anything, but it did clarify a few things." "Such as?" "Such as the fact that you sat there and let your mother tear me apart for 2 hours without saying a word. Such as the fact that when I finally stood up for myself, your first instinct was to tell me to apologize. Such as the fact that you've been lying to me about where you spend your evenings." Her coffee mug stopped halfway to her lips. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about Darren Royce. I'm talking about the Sleepy Inn Motel. I'm talking about 8 months of education conferences that seem to involve a lot more physical education than professional development." The color drained from her face so quickly I thought she might faint. She set down her mug with shaking hands. "Elias, You what? You can explain? You're sorry? It didn't mean anything?" I leaned forward. "Because I've read your emails, Marilyn. All of them. And it seems like it meant quite a lot to you." She stared at me for a long moment, and I watched 19 years of marriage collapse in her expression. The denial, the calculation, the realization that there was no way out of this corner. "How long have you known?" she asked finally. "Since Thursday night, right around the time you texted me that you were working late. And you followed me." "I didn't have to follow you. You've been so careless about covering your tracks that half the town knows about your affair. Rick's been hearing about it at the bar for months. Darren's been bragging about his older woman to anyone who'll listen." That hit her like a physical blow. "He's been... what?" Bragging, Marilyn. About how he stole another man's wife, about how easy it was, about how I never suspected a thing because I was too busy working to pay for the life you were complaining wasn't good enough. She started to cry then, but they weren't the tears of someone who was sorry. They were the tears of someone who'd been caught and was trying to figure out how to minimize the damage. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, she said. It just happened. You've been so distant lately, so focused on work. I felt invisible. Invisible. I repeated the word like I was testing its weight. You felt invisible while living in a house I paid for, driving a car I bought, enjoying a lifestyle funded entirely by my work. That's an interesting definition of invisible. It's not about money, isn't it? Because according to your emails, you've spent a lot of time complaining to Darren about how boring your life is, how you deserve better, how I'm just a construction worker who doesn't understand your needs. Sounds like it's about money to me. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. What do you want me to say, Elias? That I'm sorry? I am. That I'll end it? I will. That we can work through this? We can. I looked at her sitting there in her expensive bathrobe, in the kitchen of the house I'd been paying for while she planned her escape, and I felt something cold and final settle in my chest. No, I said. We can't. What do you mean? I mean, I'm done, Marilyn. With the marriage, with the lies, with pretending that your mother's opinion matters, with funding a life for someone who thinks I'm not good enough to live it. She stared at me like I just announced I was moving to Mars. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. Elias, please, it was a mistake. A stupid, stupid mistake. But we can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can get divorced, I said, standing up, which is exactly what we're going to do. I walked toward the stairs, planning to pack a bag and leave her to think about what came next. But she followed me, her voice rising with panic. You can't just throw away 19 years of marriage because of one mistake. I stopped on the bottom step and turned around. One mistake? Marilyn, you've been planning this affair for 8 months. You've been lying to me, stealing time from our marriage to give to another man, and letting your family treat me like garbage while you lived a double life. That's not one mistake. That's a systematic betrayal of everything we built together. But I love you. The words hung in the air between us like a lie so obvious it was almost funny. No, I said quietly. You love the security I provide. You love the house and the car and the comfortable life. You might even love the idea of me. But you don't love me, Marilyn. If you loved me, you wouldn't have spent 8 months telling another man how disappointing I am. She started to say something else, but I was already walking up the stairs. In our bedroom, my former bedroom, I pulled out a suitcase and started packing. Not everything, just enough for a few weeks, while I figured out the logistics of separating a life I'd thought was permanent. Where will you go? She asked from the doorway. That's not your concern anymore. Elias, please, can't we at least try to work this out? I zipped up the suitcase and turned to face her. You want to work it out? Fine. Call Darren right now and tell him it's over. Then call your mother and tell her you've decided to respect your husband instead of letting her tear him down. Then delete his number, quit your job so you don't have to see him every day, and spend the next year proving that you choose me over everyone and everything else. She stared at me, and I could see the calculation in her eyes. The weighing of options, the cost-benefit analysis of what she'd have to give up versus what she might gain. I can't quit my job, she said finally. I've worked too hard to build my career. Then you've made your choice, I said, picking up my suitcase. And so have I. As I walked past her toward the stairs, she grabbed my arm. This isn't over, Elias. You can't just walk away from 19 years. I looked down at her hand on my arm, then back at her face. Watch me. I pulled free and walked downstairs, out the front door, and into a life I'd never planned but was suddenly eager to begin. The apartment I rented was a furnished 2-bedroom on the other side of town, close enough to my work sites, but far enough from my former life that I didn't have to worry about running into Marilyn at the grocery store. It was clean, functional, and completely anonymous. Exactly what I needed while I figured out how to dismantle 19 years of shared existence. Anna drove down from Boston on Sunday to help me strategize. She arrived with a briefcase full of legal documents and a bottle of whiskey, which pretty much summed up her approach to crisis management. Show me everything, she said, settling into the small living room with her laptop open. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through the screenshots I'd taken. Anna's expression grew grimmer with each image. Jesus, Elias, she really documented everything, didn't she? Apparently she thought email was private. In a marriage, there's no such thing as private when it comes to adultery evidence. This is a divorce attorney's dream case. She looked up from the screen. How are you holding up? Honestly, better than I expected. It's like finding out you've been living with a stranger for 8 months. The anger is there, but mostly I just feel relieved. Relieved? To finally understand why I felt like I was failing at everything. Turns out I wasn't failing, I was being sabotaged. Anna nodded and made notes on her legal pad. Let's talk strategy. Massachusetts is a no-fault divorce state, but adultery can still affect asset division and alimony. With this level of documentation, we can probably ensure you keep most of what you brought to the marriage. What about the house? That's trickier. It's in both names, but if you can prove you made all the mortgage payments... She looked up. Please tell me you have documentation of that. 19 years of bank statements. I've been the only income source for the last 5 years since she went part-time at the school. Part-time? Anna's eyebrows rose. That's interesting. What was she doing with all that free time? Apparently planning her exit strategy. We spent the next 3 hours going through finances, assets, and timelines. By the time Anna left, I had a clear picture of what the next few months would look like. It wasn't going to be pretty, but it was going to be fair. Monday morning, I was back at work, grateful for the familiar rhythm of construction schedules and engineering problems that had actual solutions. My crew noticed I seemed different, but nobody asked questions. Construction workers have an unspoken understanding about personal problems. You deal with your shit on your own time and show up ready to work. It was around noon when my phone rang. Marilyn. Elias, we need to talk. I thought we covered everything on Saturday. I've been thinking about what you said, about making choices. Maybe we could try counseling first before we do anything drastic. I looked around the construction site, at the building we were creating from nothing but plans and materials and hard work. Everything here made sense. Every problem had a solution. Every measurement mattered. Marilyn, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I want a direct answer. Have you ended things with Darren? Silence. Have you told your mother that her treatment of me was unacceptable and that it needs to stop? More silence. Have you done anything in the last 3 days besides try to figure out how to keep both your husband and your boyfriend? It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. You want to save our marriage? Prove it. Make the hard choices. Show me that I matter more than your comfort zone. I can't just... Then we have nothing to talk about. I hung up and went back to work. That evening, I stopped by the Level Beam for a beer and to catch up with Rick. The bar was busy for a Monday night, filled with the usual mix of construction workers, teachers, and townspeople who'd been coming here for decades. Porter, Rick called out when he saw me. How you holding up, brother? Better than expected. I took a seat at the bar. What's the word around town? Rick poured me a beer and leaned in. Well, word is that Marilyn's been asking around about you, where you're staying, what you're planning, and word is that Darren Royce has been making himself scarce since the weekend. Interesting. Also interesting is that Janet Morrison was in here Saturday night, and she had some things to say about your wife's professional development activities. Janet Morrison taught English at the high school and had been friends with Marilyn for years. If she was talking, it meant the story was spreading through the school like wildfire. What kind of things? The kind that suggest Marilyn's conference attendance record doesn't match up with actual conference schedules. Janet's been doing some checking, apparently. I sipped my beer and considered this. Janet's always been thorough. She's also pissed. Seems she feels like Marilyn made her an unwitting accomplice by using her as an alibi. That was news to me. How so? Apparently Marilyn told you she was staying overnight with Janet after some of those conferences, except Janet was never involved. She found out when her husband mentioned seeing Marilyn's car at the motel. The pieces were falling into place. Marilyn hadn't just betrayed me, she'd dragged her friends into the deception, using them as cover stories without their knowledge. That was going to make her situation at work very uncomfortable. Rick, I said, hypothetically speaking, if someone wanted to make sure certain information reached certain people, how would they go about that? Rick grinned. Hypothetically? They'd probably start by buying around for the right table of teachers who happened to be having dinner here tonight. I looked around the bar and spotted them immediately. 4 women from the high school, including Janet Morrison, sitting at a corner table and talking in the intense, hushed tones that meant serious gossip was being exchanged. Set them up with whatever they're drinking, I said, pulling out my wallet, and tell them it's from someone who appreciates teachers who value honesty. Rick's grin widened. You're playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers, aren't you? I'm just making sure the truth gets the attention it deserves. As Rick delivered the drinks and my message, I finished my beer and headed home. I had work in the morning, and more importantly, I had planning to do. Because Marilyn wanted to play games with the truth? Fine. but she was about to learn that I'd been building structures while she'd been building lies, and my foundation was a lot more solid than hers. Tuesday morning brought the first real consequence of Marilyn's choices, and it came in the form of a phone call at 6 a.m. "Elias, what did you do?" Her voice was shrill with panic. "Good morning to you too, Marilyn. I'm fine, thanks for asking." "Don't play games with me. Principal Haskins wants to see me this morning. Someone sent him copies of private communications." I paused in the middle of making coffee. This was moving faster than I'd expected. "What kind of private communications?" "You know exactly what kind. How could you do this to me?" "I didn't do anything to you, Marilyn. You did it to yourself. I just made sure the truth was available to people who needed to know it." "Needed to know it? My boss doesn't need to know about my personal life." "Your boss needs to know when his employees are having affairs with other employees and using school resources to facilitate those affairs. It's called a hostile work environment, and it opens the school up to liability issues. The silence on the other end told me she hadn't considered the legal implications of her relationship with Darren. Guidance counselors were supposed to be smarter about these things." "Elias, please, if I lose my job, then you'll understand what consequences feel like, something you've been avoiding for 8 months. This is vindictive and cruel." "No, Marilyn. Vindictive and cruel would be posting your emails on Facebook for the whole town to see. This is just accountability." I hung up and finished making my coffee. Then I called Anna. "The school administration has the emails," I told her. "How did that happen?" "I may have encouraged the flow of information through appropriate channels." Anna was quiet for a moment. "Elias, I need to ask you this as your attorney. Did you do anything illegal?" I forwarded publicly observable information to people who had a legitimate interest in knowing about it. Everything I shared was already being discussed openly in local establishments by multiple witnesses. That's a very careful way of putting it. I'm an engineer, Anna. I'm always careful about structural integrity. Just be smart about this, okay? Don't give her ammunition for a counterattack. After I hung up, I drove to my current job site, a new medical building that was going up on the north side of town. The work was complex enough to require my full attention, which was exactly what I needed. There's something therapeutic about solving problems that have clear solutions. It was around noon when Rick called. "Brother, you need to hear this. Darren Royce just came into the bar, looking like someone ran over his dog. He's 3 beers in and talking to anyone who'll listen." "What's he saying?" "That you're trying to destroy his life, that the whole thing was Marilyn's idea, that he never meant for it to go this far." I set down my measuring tape. "Is he still there?" "Oh yeah, and getting louder by the minute." "I'll be right over." The level beam at noon on a Tuesday was usually quiet, just a few regulars and whoever was on lunch break from the various job sites around town. But today there was a crowd gathered around the bar, and at the center of it was Darren Royce, looking exactly like a man whose comfortable life had just exploded. He saw me the moment I walked in. The conversation stopped, and every head in the bar turned to watch what would happen next. "There he is," Darren said loudly, pointing at me with a beer bottle. "The husband who can't take a hint." I walked slowly to the bar, ordered a Coke from Rick, and turned to face Darren. He was bigger than me, younger than me, and drunk enough to be stupid, but I'd been building things with my hands for 25 years, and he'd been teaching gym class to teenagers. There are different kinds of strength. "Hello, Darren," I said calmly. "I hear you've had an interesting morning." "You snake, you ruined everything." "Did I? Because from where I sit, it looks like you ruined your own life when you decided to sleep with another man's wife and brag about it all over town." The bar was silent. Even the jukebox seemed to be holding its breath. "She came to me," Darren said, his voice getting louder. "She said you didn't appreciate her, didn't pay attention to her. She said she was lonely. And you thought the solution was to help her commit adultery instead of suggesting marriage counseling. That's interesting problem solving for an educator. You don't know what you're talking about." I took a sip of my Coke and looked around the bar. "Actually, I know exactly what I'm talking about. I know that you've been sleeping with my wife for 8 months. I know that you've been using the school's resources to coordinate your meetings. I know that you've been bragging about it to anyone who'll listen. And I know that as of this morning, your boss knows all of that too." Darren's face went pale. "You can't prove anything." I pulled out my phone and scrolled to one of the screenshots. "Want to bet?" I held up the phone so he could see the message thread. His own words, in black and white. "Your husband sounds like a real winner. What kind of man chooses concrete over you?" The color drained from his face completely. "Here's what's going to happen, Darren," I said, putting my phone away. You're going to finish your beer, go home, and start looking for a new job, because your current career in education is over, and you're going to stay away from my wife, my house, and me. You can't tell me what to do?" I stepped closer to him, close enough that only he could hear what I said next. "I'm not telling you what to do, Darren. I'm explaining what's going to happen. Because if you think ruining your career was vindictive, you really don't want to find out what I'm capable of when I stop being reasonable." He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the calculation in his eyes, the weighing of options, the realization that he was in a fight he couldn't win. "This isn't over," he said finally. "Yes, it is," I replied. "You just don't know it yet." Darren threw a 20 on the bar and walked out. The entire room watched him go, and then slowly, conversations resumed. But I could feel the shift in the atmosphere. Word would spread, the story would grow, and by evening, everyone in town would know that Elias Porter had faced down the man who'd been sleeping with his wife. Rick refilled my Coke without being asked. "That was educational," he said. "Just getting started," I replied. Because Darren was right about one thing. This wasn't over, but he was wrong about who was going to finish it. Friday afternoon, I was reviewing blueprints in the site trailer when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but the voice was familiar. "Mr. Porter, this is Principal Haskins from the high school. I wonder if we could meet to discuss a sensitive matter." "What kind of sensitive matter?" "It concerns your wife and Mr. Royce. I think it would be better if we spoke in person." An hour later, I was sitting in the principal's office for the first time since I was 17 years old. Principal Haskins was a thin, nervous man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world. "Mr. Porter, I want to start by saying how sorry I am that you're dealing with this situation." "Thank you. I also want you to know that we take these matters very seriously. When allegations of improper conduct between staff members come to our attention, we have to investigate thoroughly." "What did you find?" Haskins shifted in his chair. "Evidence of an inappropriate relationship that violated several school policies. Mr. Royce has submitted his resignation, effective immediately. As for your wife, what about her? She's been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. The relationship appears to have involved the use of school computers for personal communications and false reporting of conference attendance." I nodded. "What does that mean for her career?" "That depends on what else we find. But Mr. Porter, I have to ask, did you send those emails to the school board?" I forwarded information that I felt was relevant to the professional conduct of school employees. I believe the community has a right to know when tax-funded positions are being used to facilitate personal affairs. Haskins looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. The school board is concerned about the public relations aspect of this situation. I imagine they are. Is there any way we could handle this more quietly? I looked at this man who was asking me to help cover up my wife's affair to protect the school's reputation, and I felt something cold settle in my chest. "Principal Haskins, my wife spent 8 months lying to me, stealing from our marriage, and humiliating me in front of the entire town. She used her position at your school to facilitate an affair with a subordinate employee. She falsified reports about professional development activities and used school resources for personal communications. And now you want me to help you cover it up to avoid embarrassment? I understand your anger. No, you don't. Because if you understood my anger, you wouldn't be asking me to protect the people who caused it." I stood up. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to conduct a thorough, transparent investigation. You're going to follow your own policies regarding professional misconduct, and you're going to let the community know that the school takes these matters seriously." "Mr. Porter." "And if you don't, I'll make sure the local newspaper gets copies of everything I sent you, along with a detailed timeline of how long the administration knew about this situation before taking action." I walked out of his office and drove straight to the level beam. It was Friday evening, which meant the place would be packed with people ready to drink and talk about the week's events. Perfect timing for what I had planned. The bar was exactly as crowded as I'd expected. Teachers, construction workers, shop owners, and half the town council were scattered throughout the room. And at a corner table, looking like she was trying to disappear into the woodwork, sat Marilyn with 2 other teachers from the school. She saw me the moment I walked in. Our eyes met across the crowded room, and I saw fear there. Real fear, for the first time since this whole thing started. I walked to the bar and ordered a beer. Rick was busy, but he caught my eye and nodded toward Marilyn's table. "She's been here for an hour," he said quietly, trying to control the narrative. "What's she saying?" "That you're vindictive, that you're trying to destroy her career out of spite, that the whole thing has been blown out of proportion." I sipped my beer and considered this. Then I pulled out my phone and scrolled to one of the screenshots I hadn't shared yet. One of the more explicit messages where Marilyn had described in detail what she wanted to do with Darren the next time they were together. "Rick," I said, "how's the Wi-Fi in here?" "Strong signal." "Why?" "Because I think it's time for some transparency." I opened my laptop bag and pulled out my computer. Within minutes, I had connected to the bar's Wi-Fi and opened a presentation program. The level beam had a large screen TV that Rick sometimes used for sports games, and it was connected to a wireless system that could display content from any connected device. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, standing up and raising my voice to carry across the room, "I'd like to share some information with you about professional conduct at our local high school." The room went quiet. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned toward me. For the past 8 months, my wife, Marilyn Porter, a guidance counselor at the high school, has been having an affair with Darren Royce, a gym teacher. They've been using school computers to coordinate their meetings, lying about conference attendance, and conducting their relationship on school property during school hours. Marilyn shot to her feet. "Elias, don't." "I have documentation of all of this," I continued, "which I've shared with the school administration, but since there seems to be some confusion about the facts, I thought the community might like to see the evidence for themselves." I clicked a button on my laptop, and the first email appeared on the large screen. There was a collective gasp from the crowd as people read Marilyn's words about how boring her husband was, how she deserved better, how exciting her secret relationship made her feel. "Elias, stop this right now." Marilyn was pushing through the crowd toward me, her face flushed with humiliation and rage. I clicked to the next message, then the next, each one more damning than the last. The room was silent, except for the sound of people reading, absorbing, understanding exactly what had been happening in their tax-funded school. "You snake!" Marilyn reached me and grabbed for my laptop. "How dare you?" I closed the computer and looked at her. "How dare I what, Marilyn? Tell the truth? Show people what you really think of me, of our marriage, of the community that pays your salary? This is private." "Nothing about adultery is private when it involves public employees using public resources. You made this everyone's business the moment you decided to conduct your affair at work." The crowd was watching us like we were the evening's entertainment. I could see phones coming out, people taking pictures and videos. By tomorrow, this would be all over social media. "You've destroyed everything," Marilyn said, and now she was crying real tears. Not the calculated tears of someone trying to manipulate a situation, but the raw tears of someone whose life was collapsing in real time. "No," I said quietly. "You destroyed everything. I just made sure people could see the damage." She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw the exact moment when she realized that this was really happening, that her career was over, her reputation was ruined, and her marriage was finished. "I hate you," she whispered. "I know," I said. "You've been telling Darren that for 8 months." She turned and ran for the door. The 2 teachers who'd been sitting with her followed, leaving the bar buzzing with conversation and speculation. Rick appeared at my elbow with a fresh beer. "Well," he said, "that was something." I looked around the room at all the faces staring at me. Some shocked, some sympathetic, some clearly entertained by the drama. These were my neighbors, my community, people I'd known for years. "Anyone have questions about what they just saw?" I asked. Janet Morrison raised her hand. "Elias, I want you to know that some of us had no idea we were being used as alibis. If we'd known—" "I know, Janet. This isn't about you or anyone else she dragged into her lies. This is about accountability." Tom Bradley from the town council stood up. "What do you want us to do with this information?" "Whatever you think is right," I said. "I just wanted to make sure everyone had the facts before making any judgments about who's the victim here." I finished my beer, packed up my laptop, and walked toward the door. As I reached it, someone started clapping, then someone else joined in. Within seconds, half the bar was applauding. I turned back to face them. "Thank you," I said. "But this isn't about revenge. This is about truth. And sometimes the truth is the only foundation strong enough to build a new life on." I walked out into the November night, got in my truck, and drove home to my new apartment. Behind me, I could hear the buzz of conversation starting up again, the sound of a community processing what they'd just witnessed. My phone was already ringing by the time I got home. Anna. "Elias, what the hell did you just do? I'm getting calls from reporters." I told the truth. In a public bar, with video evidence? Jesus Christ, Elias, this is going to be everywhere by morning. "Good," I said. "Let it be everywhere. Let everyone see what 19 years of marriage looks like when one person decides to tear it down from the inside." The divorce is going to be complicated now. No, Anna. The divorce is going to be simple, because after tonight, there's no way Marilyn can claim she was the victim. There's no way she can ask for alimony or half the assets or any kind of sympathy. She's been exposed for exactly what she is, and now everyone knows it. I hung up and poured myself a drink. Outside my apartment window, I could see the lights of the town where I'd lived my entire adult life, where I'd built a career and a reputation and a marriage that had turned out to be a lie. But for the first time in 8 months, I felt like I was standing on solid ground. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Darren. We need to talk." I typed back, "No, we don't. Please, this has gone too far. Not nearly far enough. What do you want from me?" I stared at the question for a long time, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. The lies, the betrayal, the humiliation, the systematic destruction of everything I'd worked to build. Finally, I typed, "I want you to disappear. I want you to leave town, find a new life somewhere else, and never come back. Because if I see you again, if I hear your name mentioned in this town again, if you so much as think about contacting my wife again, I will make tonight look like a friendly conversation." The response came quickly. "Understood. Good. Have a nice life, Darren. Somewhere else." I turned off my phone and went to bed. Tomorrow, I would start building something new, something honest, something that couldn't be torn down by lies or betrayal or other people's opinions about what I deserved, something that was mine.